Good morning, everyone. My name is Julian Turnbull. Welcome to the Christ Central Morning Devotional. I suspect today I'm going to be like a head floating in a white background, but just bear with me and I'll try not to move too much. Today, we're looking at Romans 2, verses 17 to 29 in our journey through the book of Romans, which started a couple of weeks ago. There's not that many to catch up on. They're only 10 minutes each, so please do take the time and watch them all. Now, before I read this morning, I'm going to give us a little bit of a recap as to where we've got to. I'll go right back to the beginning of chapter 1 because we're relatively close to it, but it sort of builds in importance the more close to where we are now. So we started off with Paul introducing himself. He introduced who he was, his name. He told us why he was qualified to write this letter, and he sent greetings to those people in Rome. He then expresses his desire to go to Rome to meet with the believers there. And he says this is for teaching, but also for mutual encouragement, which is quite an encouragement in itself, that someone who's quite famous wants to come to you to talk with you so that you can both grow from it. And then he starts on his first argument. He says, everyone can see the creation of the world and how it points to God, which was described to us last week as general revelation. And then, moving on from that, he says, people have turned away from God. They've been filled with all manner of unrighteousness. And he lists, as an example, evil, covetousness, and malice. Then he goes on to say, and that's why you deserve to die. So Paul then points out that those who pass judgment on others are in actual fact passing judgment on themselves. And then it says in verse 12 that we saw last week, for all have sinned and, perish without the law. And then we come to today, verse 17 of chapter 2. So here we go. But if you call yourself a Jew and rely on the law and boast in God and know his will and approve what is excellent because you are instructed from the law, and if you are sure that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light in the darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of children, having in the law embodiment of knowledge and truth, you then who teach others, do you not teach yourself? While you preach against stealing, do you steal? You who say that one must not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law dishonor God by breaking the law. For as it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. For circumcision is of value if you obey the law. But if you break the law, your circumcision becomes uncircumcision. So if a man who is uncircumcised keeps precepts of the law, will not his uncircumcision be regarded as circumcision? Then he who is physically uncircumcised but keeps the law will condemn you who have written code and circumcision but break the law. For no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, nor is circumcision outward and physical, but a Jew is one inwardly, and circumcision is a matter of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter. His praise is not from man, but from God. There you go. So what Paul does here is he points out that there are other people, and he starts off, but if you are, wrong page, if you call yourself a Jew and rely on the law and boast in God, and then he goes to slightly take apart that argument if you're just relying on it in the wrong kind of way. I suppose one of the things we could do when we're reading this is substitute the word Christian here. So if we say, well, we're a Christian, we're okay, then what's Paul saying to us? So if we call ourselves a Christian and rely on what God's done and boast in God and know his will and approve what is excellent because you're instructed from what we've done, and if you're sure of all of those great things, the question I suppose is raised, do we rely on what we've done? And are we safe because we've memorized all of the Bible from front to back and know exactly what job we're doing in church on a Sunday morning? Well, we could carry on because that's quite a favourable position to start with. We are confident of our salvation. We're a guide to the blind, a light in the darkness, an instructor to the foolish, and a teacher of children. That's all favourable stuff, and they're all good and worthy things, and we might do all of those. And that could be because we have the embodiment of knowledge and truth. Well, surely as Christians, we have that revelation. And then here comes the big bit. He says, well, then are you actually all hypocrites? Do you steal? Have I borrowed pens from work and not returned them? Have I done things that I need to do when I'm supposed to be working for someone else? Have I paid cash ever to avoid paying tax? Do we commit adultery, which we know that Jesus defines as being in our minds and not necessarily physical? Or do we have idols? But if idolatry is increasing myself and pushing Jesus down, have we committed idolatry? So there's some quite scathing words there against people who would say, well, we're all believers and we're all okay. And then Paul sort of sidetracks in talking about circumcision. And I'm going to paraphrase that slightly and say, well, do you wear a cross and behave badly as opposed to that person that doesn't wear a cross but behaves well? Do you have an outward sign of your faith but not actually act as though you are a believer? Or is the other true? So that could be a reason why our name is blasphemed. And then he comes on to verse 28 and 29 at the end. So he says, you need to actually be saved, changed inwardly to be saved. And the question is, are you right with God? Or where is your heart? Because he says it's the heart that actually drives everything here. And it's the heart that tells others whether you're saved or not. So reading on a bit further and understanding a bit more, it's if your heart is transformed and your heart is changed inwardly, then you will be a believer. And God himself will praise you. So it won't necessarily be that someone will come up to you at the end of the service and say, hey, thanks for putting out all 80 chairs today. That's really good. Thank you very much. But God will thank you for it. So let's think a little bit more about these last two verses at the end. Are we transformed inwardly? Do we take up our cross daily? Do we fulfill our duties to Jesus and the church? Do we pray? Do we praise? And if God is asking you to do something and is able to use you to do that thing, and you're outwardly filled with praise and worship, then I think in actual fact, we should be quite confident that we are believers. Thank you very much, everyone. Good morning.